Hello, very beautiful community. We're going to talk about what's wrong with the NATO summit and what's wrong with what Mark Rutte has been doing in his tactics of managing Trump. But I've got some bad news. I'm very grumpy today. I, as is typical at the moment, slept 30 minutes last night and got woken up by bad microvascular and heart episodes. And so I'm extremely grumpy. And I definitely, for sure, 100% will unleash my grumpiness on the beautiful community. And it's very important that some of you begin to prepare your fingers and toes to press the unsubscribe button, because I'm going to engage in a tiny bit of chiggerification of a big minority of the community. And at the end of the day, if you're going to leave, then say that you're unsubscribing in the comments, and I come round and going to give you a goodbye hug. That's the way it works, beautiful community. So let's get into this business of triggering you. You've seen a lot of positive headlines, 5% commitment, a big triumph for Trump, blah, blah, blah. What's difficult? What's difficult is that more than a handful of countries are still not meeting the 2% margin. What's difficult is that we're looking at Ukraine getting deprioritized. What's difficult is that we have an American administration that's not in a position to make any commitments, because Trump's commitments are meaningless, because commitments require positions backed by beliefs, but Trump has no beliefs, with a small number of exceptions. He just has dispositional states, and they fluctuate depending on what are the narcissistic supply needs he needs to meet at any given point. And the other bit of tricky news is the ingenious, non-genius tactic that Mark Rutte has employed with Trump. Now, you've all seen the text message which Trump put online within a minute. Now, when Rutte and his team were writing that text with big capital letters there, they would have had a certain percentage point consideration that Trump could make it public. There's no way you could really send that without considering that that would be possible. But then, in the context of discussing Trump bringing together warring parties, Rutte said, well, that's what daddy has to do sometimes. And I got a call today on the telephone saying that 24.798% of the beautiful community think that Rutte's approach is brilliant. And we're going to get the fingers and the toes ready to press the unsubscribe button, because we're going to do some triggerification of that 4.734521% of the beautiful community. So let's talk about this. So why do I want to say very strongly, except not in one sense of strength, that this is a very clear case where Rutte is wrong and irresponsible? Now, the one exception is that I genuinely couldn't give a hoot what you think, except that I prefer that you think for yourself. So I'd much rather you think something that you've thought up for yourself than you sort of, conceding a point of view because I'm imposing it on you, right? So I'm very, very uninterested in you taking my point of view because I've put it across very strongly. I'm interested in you taking your point of view above all, and only secondarily interested in what it is. But putting that massive caveat aside, let's try to trigger you. So I think this is not close. And I think that the judgment that Rutte's approach is good isn't just a tactical mistake. It's based on big delusion about the state of the world And there is actually a connection between European citizens who think that Rutte's approach is good and European citizens who engage in the kind of discourse that helps Europe lose to Putin. Now, I hate politicizing, right? So I'm doing this to ping you a little bit. I absolutely am against this idea that a view can be criticized because it's politically unconstructive. No. You can take whatever view of the world you want. If it happens to be unconstructive but truthful, well, so be it. However, in this case, what we're talking about is itself a practical technique of engagement. So it's not possible in this case to make that separation. So it's often said, for example, of John Mearsheimer, that he's delusional about what Putin is up to, and that's harmful. And I agree that it's delusional. He's delusional about what Putin is up to, but I don't agree that it's harmful. It's academic speech. And by definition, it can't be harmful until Mearsheimer begins to engage in practical support for the wrong side. Then up until that happens, he's just engaging in academic speech or public intellectual speech. And that constitutively can't be harmful, because if you say it's harmful, you're anti-democratic. And if you're anti-democratic, you're a big loser, right? And if you're a big anti-democratic loser, you're creating a situation that's anyway bad for Ukraine, because Ukraine depends on the West keeping its democracies. Right? So Ukraine depends on Mearsheimer going around saying that Putin's got a valid point when he doesn't. Right? So you've got to slow right down here with bot-like activism, talking about political damage. However, we're talking about a practical technique here in the case of Rutte, and let's do it. So what's fundamentally wrong with the idea that, oh yeah, it's a good tactic, he's got to try something? What's wrong with it apart from certain obvious things, like the fact that A, Trump is incapable of making commitments, as we just mentioned, and B, the fact that Trump actually deals better with strength when it comes from people who are not welcomed into his fantasy society of narcissistic marriage. So Netanyahu and Putin are in that society. He gets a lot of narcissistic supply out of positioning himself next to these figures, demonstrating himself to be as powerful as them to change the world for better or worse. And when they suck up to him, if they do, he actually likes it. But when Keir Starmer sucks up to him, or Mark Rutte sucks up to him, Trump actually doesn't like it much, and he doesn't respect it much. But apart from banal considerations like this, fundamentally, it goes like this. Rutte's approach works if you think that there is no crisis of liberal democracy and that Trump is an aberration. Rutte's approach works if that's the case, because Trump's going to be replaced by kind of Obama or Mitt Romney, and we're going to be back to a kind of version of history as it was in the recent past. But if you think that you have your own Trumps growing left, right, and center, including in your own country, if you think that Trump is a precursor of things to come, if you think that Trump is actually, with a couple of extensions, a version of Putinism, a version of a global monarchist ideology doing the round that says that what makes political decisions legitimate is that the leader makes them. If you think all of that's going on, then it's profoundly damaging. There is no way you can argue into a compelling justification for what Rutte is doing unless you think that liberal democracy is basically okay. If you think it isn't, you need to conclude that what he's doing is very counterproductive. Moreover, it sets a bad example, right? That you can suck up to these domestic and foreign manifestations of authoritarian monarchism. And it just debases trust in institutions at home because it looks so lame, so fake, so contorted, so, contrived in an age of populist authenticity, that it's just going to make people think this EU thing, these European bureaucracies, these NATO bureaucracies, they've got to sink, for goodness sake. They've become out of touch with ordinary citizens' needs and sentiments. And it's inexcusable behavior from Rutte. Not in the sense that he's doing anything intentionally bad. He's just doing his best. He's worked out what he thinks is a good tactic and he's just doing it. But it's inexcusable in a kind of way that you wouldn't blame him necessarily because he's trying to do his best, but you could express some other kind of feeling of ethical disappointment with him. Because it just prioritizes the short term over the medium term. You're sucking up to a version of 1.0 authoritarianism, and 2.0 authoritarianism is, galvanizing itself, manifesting itself, coming into existence all around you. And in that kind of world, you've got a situation basically where you need to be proactive, you need to go on offense, and defense politics doesn't work, right? And this is a classic example of defense politics that tries to cling to the possible sustenance of a world that's actually already gone. Rutte is doing theatrics with Trump for the benefit of a world that no longer exists, with an eye on a future that is impossible. And that's why it's helpful sociologically, now get the unsubscribe buttons ready, to say that there is not just something misguided, but there is actually something bot-like in the thought, oh, he's done his best with Trump, and we've got to agree with that. And what's bot-like about it is that feeling that you've got to stand up for your side, if you like, no matter what empirical evidence tells you, no matter what history tells you. And what history tells you is that you've got a Western democratic decline, and the forces that will be able to stand up and push that back to some degree are going to have to be forces that are proactive and that absolutely do away with the Fukuyamian idea, on which any justification of Rutte must depend, that Trump's an aberration. You've got to be firm. Now, one very simple way to be firm with Trump is to realize that Trump is hated by half of his country. Trump still is president in a democracy with many functioning institutions. They're being degraded, but they're functioning. And there's, of course, an attack on state capacity by the Trump administration. But these institutions are still functioning. And Trump's very vulnerable. He doesn't have the support of the majority of Americans, neither do the Democrats. So take confidence from that. Take confidence from how many people are on your side, which is not the side of irresponsible authoritarian populism. So all we've done is a sketch, not a knockout argument, but we've done it in a deliberately sort of zingy and provocative way. So I'm saying goodbye to 0.1% of the community, and I'll come and give you a hug. That's not too loud.